Excellent. Well, perhaps we'll get started. Good evening, everybody. It's lovely to see you all this evening. Thank you very much for coming to this joint event between the National Farmers Union and the China-Canada Agricultural Development Council, or CCADC, for a film screening of Earth to Mouth and to host a great slate of panelists. I hope you all get something out of this event. I've been really looking forward to it. My name is James Hannay. I'm the policy analyst for the National Farmers Union. I want to begin this evening by acknowledging the land I'm located on and the indigenous peoples and nations of this land. Right now, I can look outside my window and see the Deshkan-Zibi, the Anishinaabe-Moan name for the Antler River, or what many now call the Thames River. I live on the London Township Treaty lands, traditional territories of the Adirondack, the Anishinaabewaki, Haudenosaunee, and Lenape. I'm also connected to the lands of the nations of the Chippewas of the Thames, Oneida, and Munsee, Delaware by the Deshkan-Zibi. The NFU acknowledges the long, vibrant history of Indigenous peoples on these lands. We also acknowledge that the treaties have not been fulfilled in either letter or in spirit. As people living on and producing from this land, we acknowledge the need for equitable access. We acknowledge that many settlers, rural and urban, have received important benefits from the colonial dispossession of Indigenous lands, and we acknowledge that all our relations with land and people have been harmed by this ongoing regime. We consider how we can better treat each other, pursue justice, repair and build our relationships with land and Indigenous peoples, and fulfill the recommendations of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. This evening, we're pleased to welcome a great slate of panelists. Young Chan, award-winning film director, Jingshu Yao, PhD student at the University of Toronto's iSchool, David Fu, president of the CCADC, and Sun Shan, the NFU's BIPOC Caucus vice president and CCADC board member. Please keep any questions or chat reactions until the question and answer section, as it can be distracting to both presenters and viewers. If you have a technical problem, however, or need to contact me during the presentation, please message me privately in the chat for that purpose only. I'd like to thank our behind-the-scenes team who made this evening's event possible, particularly to Sun Shan, who was instrumental in organizing the event, and to NFU Communications Manager Jillian Cormier, who does a huge amount of work publicizing these events and helping get the word out. I would also especially like to thank Arthur Wan, who is providing Mandarin translation for this event. Arthur is a member of CCADC and the NFU and is an ATIO CTTIC certified translator and kindly volunteered to translate for us this evening. Thank you so much, Arthur. I really appreciate that. So as I just mentioned, we are pleased to offer simultaneous Mandarin translation for this event this evening. So tonight's event is bilingual. To access translation, please go to the bottom of your Zoom screen and click on the globe icon that says Interpretation and select Mandarin if you'd like to listen in Mandarin. If you're listening in Mandarin, please say so in the chat to let our interpreters know. For those of you unfamiliar with our organization, the National Farmers Union is a grassroots membership organization advocating for sustainable farms and a just food system. Our members farm and work on farms all across Canada, producing a wide range of crops and livestock using diverse production methods. If you are not yet a member, we invite you to join. If you farm, you can join as a voting member. Non-farmers can become associate members. To do so, you can go to www.nfu.ca. I've also will post a link in the chat at the end of this event for that. And now about the CCADC. Founded in 2015, CCADC is a membership-based, not-for-profit organization supporting Chinese farmers in Canada, gaining 180 plus members over the past 10 years, with mostly second career farmers based primarily in Ontario, but with members across the Prairies, Prince Edward Island, and British Columbia. CCADC members' farms grow and specialize in vegetables, fruits and berries, vineyards and winemaking, mushrooms, greenhouses, flowers, specialty seedlings, sapling seedlings, agriculture tech, food distribution, organic fertilizers and pesticides, grain and pulse farming, specialty soybeans and soy products, on-farm sheep, goats and pigs, and traditional Chinese medicine herbs. The CCADC aims to support Chinese farmers in Canada by fostering collaboration, sharing expertise, and providing hands-on learning opportunities to overcome challenges and thrive together. For more information or to join, please go to ccadconline.ca or you can email ccadc2015@gmail.com. The schedule for this evening, and this evening will begin by showing Earth to Mouth, which will last for about 40 minutes, after which I will welcome our panelists onto the Zoom stage for guided panel discussion, and then we will open the floor for about 30 minutes of question and answers. I will let you all know that we are recording the presentation and we'll post it on the NFU YouTube channel as well as the NFU website, and I'm sure the same can be done on the CCADC website. The question and answer period will not be posted, but again, the panel session will be. I'm now pleased to present Earth to Mouth. Filmed at the Wingfong Farm in Ontario, Earth to Mouth follows the tilling, planting, and harvesting of Asian vegetables destined for Chinese markets and restaurants. On 80 acres of land, Lau Qingfei, her son, and half-dozen migrant Mexican workers care for the plants. For Yung Quan, her son, the farm represents personal and financial independence. For his mother, it is an oasis of peace. For the Mexican workers, it provides jobs that help support their children back home. I'm going to unshare my screen quickly to reshare the film, but I would request that all of you please turn off your video while we're showing the film just to help with bandwidth issues. Well, that was very excellent, and I'll now welcome up our four panelists. I'm gonna start spotlighting you so everybody can see you. Give me one moment. I'll ask I'll ask Sinshan to turn her video on as well. There we are. Okay, excellent. And I'll spotlight myself too, so I'm in the picture as well. Excellent. Well, all four of our panelists are up on the screen. I need to introduce them now. Pardon me for one moment. Well, I'll introduce Yun Chang first. Yun Chang is a Chinese-Canadian multi-award-winning film director of feature documentaries Up the Yangtze, China Heavyweight, The Fruit Hunters, and This Is Not a Movie, as well as Earth to Mouth, which you just watched. Chan's critically acclaimed films have both premiered and been awarded internationally. He's a member of the Directors Guild of Canada, and in 2013, he was invited to become a member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, the organization behind the Academy Awards and Oscars. Jingshu Yao was born and raised in Nanjing, China. Jingshu is a PhD student at the University of Toronto Faculty of Information. Her research focuses on recipes, culinary innovation, personal stories, and community building. Jingshu is interested in using oral history as a tool for community-based storytelling. Her digital project on East Asian recipe stories, North York Recipes for Healing, was completed under Heritage Toronto's Equity Heritage Initiative in 2023. Jingshu is also a creative writer and is currently working on a novel project under the Toronto Art Council Newcomers Mentorship Program. David Fu immigrated to Canada in 1999 and is owner of Sun Valley Farm in Saskatchewan with 4,200 acres cultivated cropland and has been cash cropping since 2011 and recently added a sheep farm in 2024. David is also the sitting president of CCADC. Sun Shan was raised in Beijing, China, and immigrated to Canada in 2014. She lives and farms in Ottawa with her partner Li Bo. Their small farm business, Chi Garden, is a certified organic vegetable farm and a gathering space for fostering community conversations around food, culture, and many connected traditions, such as fermentation. She serves on the board of directors for the Chinese Canadian Agricultural Development Council and is the vice president of the BIPOC caucus within the National Farmers Union. Well, thank you to the four of you for joining this event this evening. Really appreciate it. Here's my first set of questions. I'll direct towards Young and Jingshu. I'll go to Young first. Thank you for joining us this evening. Um, I wanted to ask, what was the core story you wanted to capture in Earth to Mouth?
Firstly, 谢谢大家, and thank you all for having me on this panel and to screen this film, Earth to Mouth. In fact, Earth to Mouth was the first film I ever made, and it's from 2000 and is it 2001 or 2002? I know I shot it in 2000, and I recall that it was during production. Uh, the September 11th attacks happened while we were on our way to the airport, Pearson International Airport. We were driving one of the migrant workers to the airport, and we had to turn around. So it sticks in my mind very clearly the production experience. Um, yeah, the I think at the time in 2000 or even in 1999, I believe when I started researching the project, um, it struck me that there were Chinese owned and operated farms in rural Ontario. That to me was something new to me. And then as I did some research, I discovered that there were other farms that were Asian operated. And certainly, as we know now, as I know now, there's plenty historically in Canada from the Japanese Canadians onwards. But but in particular, this farm struck me as something interesting because I didn't know they were growing Asian vegetables for the local market. And so I went to visit the farm and I researched and I met the matriarch of the farm and she was really interesting to me as an immigrant to Canada, supporting her son. Um, and I guess the romantic side of me, and I have to just tip my hat to all of you farmers and I'm grateful for all the work you do. It's I think in my film I may have as a young filmmaker at the time, I think I may have romanticized a little bit the experience of farming. I know now how challenging it is and rigorous it is, and it isn't it isn't easy, not at all by any means. But I think what I wanted to show in this film was something more about the relationship between the mother and son and nature and the passing of the seasons. I wanted to showcase something about the passage of time and life, you know, especially for the grandmother. Um, and it so happened to be around this farm and the idea of the cycle of growing and it just all kind of the young romantic in me was very inspired by the location and the people there at the time.
I guess following on that romanticism, um, and that theme of growing, um, was there did your I guess did your perspective on you talked a little bit about the work of
Yeah.
that's required to put into a farm, but did your perspective on Chinese Canadian farmers change at all, or is there anything else that you learned while doing that film?
Well, I think at the time in 2001 or 2099 to 2000, 2001, I mean, that's a long time ago. And I think things have rapidly, and I think my fellow panelists could perhaps enlighten me a little bit about where things have gone since then in terms of Asian farming, specifically, you know, the diasporic community growing for the market in Canada. Um, I would like to know more about, you know, how is there a number of how many farms there are out there? Because at the time, it just seemed so unique to me, and I know times have changed, obviously, and communication has gotten better as well. Um, you know, I didn't there wasn't really a lot of like at that time I just had a cell phone for the first time. Research was on the ground and driving around and talking to the supermarkets to ask them where there were other Asian owned farms. You know, I there wasn't really an internet database at the time to search this kind of information. This is how old that movie is. So, uh, I guess I'm just, you know, over the course of the years that they've passed, uh, over the years, now I see how prevalent and important and kind of part of our society, uh, Asian groceries, Asian food, all of that movement has become such a part of our language and culture in Canada, and in North America, to speak frankly. And so, um, I guess upon reflection, I don't think I would have anticipated where things have gotten to today, and I'm excited to know that there is just so much more, um, and I get to benefit from that as a Chinese Canadian. I can get fresh produce locally in Toronto, and I know that it has been grown in Canada.
Excellent. And the relationship between the family and the migrant workers, I mean, it's interesting. Both sets of people are migrants. Do you think that their story reflects a broader experience of the experiences of migrants, but also specifically about Chinese Canadian farmers or Chinese Canadians?
Well, I think on a very superficial level, perhaps my film highlights some of the kind of immigrant experiences that the Mexican workers faced in parallel with the Chinese farm owners. Um, there are other films, and my colleague, filmmaker Min Suk Lee, has made some beautiful films about migrant workers in Canada. I recall Migrant Dreams is one of the films, and I believe it's available on the NFB website as well, which goes into a little more depth the political and social conflicts of being a migrant worker, seasonal migrant worker. And as I was filming Earth to Mouth, and this is to be speak honestly, there was some conflicts arising between the migrant workers and their conditions. Um, but as a filmmaker, I didn't want to waver from my point of view with what my film was about, really. A seasonal year in the life of this family. And so it was never the intention to make a critique of migrant working experiences. That just wasn't the point. And so I'm happy to know that Min Suk Lee has made those films, and they're necessary to see and engage with. My film was, I think, just a little more of that poetic kind of romantic film from a naive young filmmaker looking at the farming life. Um, I think something I've learned, and I've since gone on to make films, with farmers in mainland China. I made a film about people who lived along the Yangtze River and were being relocated by the Three Gorges Dam, and they were farmers, and you just see how in mainland China every piece of land, if it's a available piece of land, is used for growing something, even in a city, which was eye-opening to me as a Chinese Canadian, first generation Chinese Canadian. Um, so I think I see that farming isn't always the choice for the way of life that people want to make for themselves. Certainly in Canada, um, and I think nowadays it takes a certain amount of acumen to think ahead, just in terms of what is to be farmed. And I'm curious to hear more from the others as well about this.
Thank you. Um, Jingshu, you've researched some of the early Chinese Canadian farmers and how they managed to survive despite severe restrictions on land ownership and systemic social inclusion. One of the few well-documented cases which you've looked at is the Chong family farm. I was wondering if you could speak a bit more to your historical work on that and what you found.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, amazing film, and I hope when I was doing the research on that project, I had consulted your film, Yun-Chan, because it might have helped me to get a bit more present or close to present perspective on Chinese-owned farms. But I was working on a research project on Chong Family Farm, which is one of the earliest Chinese-owned agriculture business in Toronto. It used to locate at um, I would say suburb at the time, in the early 1900s. So this farm involved two main farmers that were migrated from Guangdong province, China. And they came around 2010. And at the time, there were the Chinese Immigrant Act that's about to put in place. So there were 500 head tax when they arrived in Canada. And initially, the two farmers, Henry and Charlie Chong, um, they weren't growing Chinese vegetables because the market was mainly Western. So they were growing lettuce, celery, carrots, and along those lines. But with the Exclusion Act getting repealed in the 90, well, the Exclusion Act was implemented in 1923, so it was 100-year anniversary, actually, 2 years ago when I worked on the project. But after the Exclusion Act was repealed, the farm started to grow Chinese vegetables. Like many of those were actually same with the farm that were showed in the documentary, like bok chai, ganlan, and things like that. And because at the time the Chinese community in Toronto was also expanding due to the removal of the Exclusion Act, so the demand was growing significantly, and the Chong family farm was able to have more clients that were seeking Chinese vegetables. At the time, they were able to make direct connections with Toronto's Chinatown and make on-demand delivery on the same day for Toronto, and then also delivery by train to customers in other cities in Ontario and even in Quebec. So for a very long time, they were the direct supplier for many of the Chinese restaurants in Toronto's Chinatown and beyond. And I guess that story, I actually see quite a lot parallel with the Mexican migrant worker in the documentary, because initially, because of there was a law in British Columbia called Act to Prevent Chinese from Acquiring Farmland that was passed in 1884, which basically says Chinese Canadian are not allowed to purchase farmland, so they're not able to purchase land. And they were working as seasonal hire for mostly Caucasian-owned farmland. That's why a lot of these histories were not well documented, because they were seasonal workers and there were no record of them working. And when we looked at the earliest record possible, it's mostly saying they turned to farming in British Columbia in 1800s. So a lot of these records are still sometimes being discovered by talking to people who are descendants of these farmers, and they have memories or hearing their ancestors, previous generation talking about the history orally. So a lot of these collection and reviving of this history are still ongoing.
And both of you are welcome to answer this question, but I'm gonna pose this one to Jingshu more specifically. Given the recent rise in racism against Chinese Canadians, what, in your opinion, is the relevance of these historical stories to farming and food production today? And how do these past experiences inform or connect to the challenges faced by Chinese Canadian farmers now?
I guess I'll start and welcome to jump in Chang. So basically, my research in 2023 that was based in North Shore, Toronto, is on recipe for healing. I study food and recipe and how to document community memories. And one of the aspects I was looking at was it was just after COVID-19 pandemic, and the community, Chinese community, had experienced a lot of rise in anti-East Asian, but mostly anti-Chinese kind of racism during COVID-19. And there were a lot of concerns over food safety at Chinese Canadian grocery store, restaurant, directing at Chinese produce and things like that. And when I was talking to the community members living in North Shore, Toronto, which is a used to be suburb, but currently very fast developing area that had attracted a lot of mostly East Asian, but also some Iranian immigrant to live there. And they were experiencing a lot of fear because the rise in discrimination for being in the present in a Chinese grocery store or purchasing the produce or being associated with Chinese cuisine or going to Chinese restaurants. And Chinese business owners, whether it's restaurants or grocery store, were saying that they fair people would vandalize their property because of this. So unfortunately, like I said, the initial reasons for a lot of the Chinese immigrants, early immigrants, turned to farming was because the Exclusion Act had prevented them from getting jobs, other type of jobs, and pursuing education and things like that. And unfortunately, history turned to repeat itself. And many of the current conflicts and crises around the world, it's somewhat parallel with what had happened in the past. But I guess what we have learned in the past, the history has also pointed to the ability of immigrant community, not just Chinese, but a lot of immigrant communities' ability to thrive and to grow, even when they're subject to discrimination. And I guess that's a quality that is central to the community, which will help us to pull through the next challenge.
I mean, if I can just quickly answer, I think if anything, what I've learned as I've made films about Chinese people is our ability to be very resilient and to, I look at actually I have a friends and family friends who are farmers in Costa Rica and all over the world from Chinese diasporic backgrounds um, and I see the resilience, um, uh, I and as Jinshu said, it does things happen in cycles and waves, I guess. Um, uh, and I think maybe if one can draw a line through to farming and growing, produce, is that it does require a thick skin and and a real sense of the ability to push through adversity, and hence I really admire that the ethic of the farming ethic and what it requires of someone's stamina. And so I see that in the farming community and certainly the immigrant farming community. And um, I'll leave it at that.
Excellent. Thank you. I will also acknowledge that I am asking you questions about a 20-year-old film, as I mentioned earlier, so I appreciate your answers
Thanks.
very much.
I'm trying to remember all the anecdotes. It's been a while.
Absolutely. I guess one quick question before we move on to asking Sunshan and David some questions. It's interesting. The matriarch of the farm kept mentioning that it was an important source of freedom, but you mentioned early in the film that farming was seen as sort of the lowest class, and was sort of funny that her son got into farming. Those two things aren't juxtaposed necessarily, but I was wondering if you could speak to sort of that relationship between freedom and I guess being tied to the land in some ways.
Oh, that may be, I'll speak to what I can, what I'm not by no means an expert. Clearly, I'm not a farmer, and I don't really have that skill. But I would say that farmers that I've encountered. And I made a film called The Fruit Hunters, which is about farmers and people around the world who are preserving and collecting and growing rare varieties of fruit. That is also something you can look up on the internet if you want to find it. It's called The Fruit Hunters. But through that experience and through Earth to Mouth, and certainly through my adoration of the farming kind of life experience that I've encountered is that I think that it's this idea of being in nature, being in outdoors, being untethered, being your own boss, being untethered by the demands of a traditional 9 to 5 kind of career. Um, that is what makes the agricultural life kind of exceptional. Um, I know that people who I knew who grew up in the city who then went to become farmers all, you know, all tell me how much happier they are. Even though it's such hard work, they are much happier. And I admire that greatly. I wish I could do that as well. Um, but I guess there is something else that requires the mind of a farmer to be able to handle all the ups and downs. Um, I think I think yes, you're right. Farming is looked upon as a kind of a in China, in other cultures, I'm sure too. In China, it is considered kind of a lower class. There's the peasant class kind of association with farming. But I think, as we know here in North America, it's not really treated that same way at all. In fact, um, I think it is with much respect here, in terms of what Canadians do as farming careers go. I think it's something that we look with respect. And so, um, you know, I think that would be the line that connects the two, perhaps.
We can go to two farmers right now to answer some questions.
Yes.
David and Sunshan, my first question for you is, how was your farming experience in relation or in comparison to the film Earth to Mouth?
You can be honest too, by the way.
Um, I first of all, this is my second time watching the movie, the film, and I actually sought you out. It touched me so very deeply, that whole seasonal transition as a new immigrant to Canada, to Ontario, and seeing a lot of the not just the crops, the vegetables, but the birds, the sky, the trees, the snow. I think it really is it's a really beautiful piece capturing. And even though you're right, I think that, like, for me as someone who never farmed and now running a small ecological farm in Ottawa at one of the community farms called Just Fruit Community Farm, the beginning of that steep learning curve, but when you're really lost and having that infusion of nature, of the land supporting you. And I think it is so real and it rings true till today, despite all kinds of challenges. We are a much smaller operation. We're a certified organic vegetable production. I think we're still figuring things out. We really are learning by doing. But it was extremely touching, and I'm envious to see that there is a generational support over there with the mom and the son and a team of workers. My partner Libo, and he is the main kind of farm labor, and he, I think, would definitely be very envious of that team approach to farming. Um, and then also, I want to say that I'm seeing a really connection there in terms of this larger history. We're hearing just bits and pieces from the Mexican farm workers about how they want to eventually have their own land to be able to work their own soil. And I think that whole history of dispossession, displacement, and the resilience for having to come in so far to Canada away from their family, those phone calls to home, and mom's phone call to her, I think, children or grandchildren. There is just a powerful connection of the people, of the shared history of displacement, dispossession, loss, family transitions. So even though we operate as a farm very differently, the emotions both towards nature and the land and towards those fellow farm workers, I think it really is also how we would feel, but unable to really describe in such a visual way. So I thank you for that. I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. Just your film, Chang, is just very touching. Just brought me back to my childhood. I was just born and raised in a peasant farmer in China. Same thing. We don't have enough food to eat, so people are hungry. Just shortage is the mainstream. No matter how hard you work, you don't have enough food to eat. So yeah, that's the story that just got me very moved. So yeah, since I just moved to Saskatchewan to farm, so since I totally changed, just from too little, too small to too big. So yeah, that's a total big change. And also, yeah, from the history of this Chinese community, Chinese immigrant farming in Canada. So in the past 20 or 25 years, there is a lot of people, they move to the prairie to farm over there. Yeah, it's just there are stories over there. If you want to go there someday, I can just guide you to some farmers from the Chinese origin. Yeah.
And maybe it is time for a part 2.
Excellent. I David, I'm going to ask you this question, but Sunshan, you're welcome to answer it as well. David, how do principles like Shen Bu Er, the inseparability of body and land, and Yao Shi Bian, food as medicine, influence the way Chinese immigrants practice agriculture in Canada?
Yeah, I think just Xunshan will just answer this question better. Or what?
I'm happy to give it a crack. So 身土不二, and your body and the soil or the land are not two. There's oneness in your health and the food you eat. I think this philosophy is Eastern Asian of origin and somehow challenges the prevailing Western industrial food system that we're seeing, I think, in the majority of our food production today in North America, including Canada. So never the traditionally the food production system was never really isolated, and it's always considered interconnected with the land you grow. What you eat is who you are. However, there are like in Canada, there are many challenges towards that traditional philosophy. But I, with my conversations with many Chinese Canadian farmers, people are all saying this, like, how can I grow this? If I'm seeing like the farms around, if they spray, how can that food, how can we stomach that food? Eventually, where will that pesticides go into our water, eventually into our guts? So I'm hearing a lot of questions, not really in a challenging kind of the system way, but saying what can we do as immigrant farmers in terms of what we choose to grow, and then how do we tell our customers that the food we grow here are freer from that sort of industrial input. And 药食同源, the same food as medicine. I mean, it is easier said than done, but indeed, traditionally, you don't need to have medicine. The food is your medicine in its diversity, in its emotional quality, in its ancestral kind of passed down through generation values. So food is medicine can be interpreted, in even in a broader sense than the 身土不二, than the land and body connection, because we as immigrants, and you are all the more in sync with where you come from and who you are. You gotta ask those questions like even more as an acute in an acute way in comparison it and if you haven't emigrated.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna go back. Oh,
yeah,
go ahead, David.
yeah. I'll just say something about this. You know, when I farm in Saskatchewan, we know just the balance of the nutrition, either for the soil or for people, are just equally important. Once the nutrition, the balance, all the supplies, or even including chemicals or fertilizer or everything, if it is not balanced in the soil, the crop won't be healthy. They will just develop disease. So that's why just we always say the food is medicine, medicine is food. So some say in this regard, yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. Jingshu, I'm going to come back to you quickly for a bit of a historical angle, and then I'll go to Sunshan and David. Putting down roots is a powerful metaphor for immigration. How has farming helped Chinese immigrants establish a sense of belonging in Canada, and that agriculture was not just a means of survival, but also a form of cultural transmission and identity? Could you speak to that a little bit in the context of your historical research?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I can start with I guess my own experience, and then I can talk a bit more about the historical aspect. Because when I came to Canada in 2018 as a student, I immediately have access to all the food that I used to, like bok chai, ganlan, or lobo and things like that. And I have the previous generation of Chinese farmers, immigrant farmers, so thanks to, because they are the person who brought these over. So I, as a new immigrant, was able to enjoy that, like many other new immigrants, Chinese immigrants in the country, was able to enjoy that once they arrived here. And a lot of times, knowledge about food, growing food, harvesting, preserving, but also cooking, these are embodied knowledge, and they are traditional knowledge that hold within the community, and different community have different practices. And I think through practicing these embodied knowledge in a new place, it's where the immigrant community are starting to, making new identity and making new community through connections, communications, but also through the direct act of um, adaptation, changing, but still following the same, as you said, root of the practice. So they are not only just connecting themselves to the new place, the new sense of belonging, but also they are building a new community for people who came after to follow. And when I was working on the research about the early Chinese farmers in Toronto, I was looking at the current data, but I guess the other panelists could correct me because you guys are more attuned to the current situation. But the data I got was a farm operated by Chinese Canadian were about 362 arcs on average. I don't know if that's correct, but I guess that's a I guess shows how long the community had came, and how far it could potentially go in the future.
Thank you. David or Sunshan, either of you want to answer that question?
Actually, yeah, from my experience, a lot of people from China, they have a dream. They want own a piece of land. That's just so, actually, they're so firm, those kind of dream. Whenever there is an opportunity, they will buy land. However, something is just regarding the farming. The climate, the soil type, and also the market and the new challenges we are facing here for the new immigrant, it's not that easy to put their foot down to the soil to actually farm. However, there are some people, they are brave enough, just like me. They will just settle down in a farm and start our lifestyle and our career and our business. There's just 3 in 1. So farming is a very, very interesting just path for anyone. It's a lifestyle, it's a business, and also it's a job.
I would briefly add to that yes, putting down roots, jargon is literally means like putting down roots, and it applies to, of course, farmers and those, as David is saying, brave souls who choose to embrace this as a career. But also to almost every household. We know how many gardens out there in people's front yards and backyards. And during the pandemics, we hosted many webinars. Just there are more people who are wanting to learn how to do that. It is not just a skill. It's not just about food production. It's also about emotionally processing this whole emigration process. And it really, that very vegetable, as Jinshu was referring to, that sweet bacteria or gailan, it is also grieving. It's grievance of your separation from home or from your culture, and in a way rebuilding a sense of new home and sense of place. So there is a lot of literal and metaphorical meaning to jargon, to putting down roots. And for those who choose to farm, and then it means a whole lot more. It also means how to make this make sense in terms of building a livelihood.
Excellent. Well, I wanted to now ask you, Sunshan and David, about the CCATC and why it was founded, what its goals are, and any key initiatives that you're working on at the moment.
I know that David is one of the initial founders, and please do share.
Yeah, actually, yeah, the community of the new immigrant from China, they put their foot into the soil and start their farming, and not that many. And also we face a lot of challenges. So that's why it's about 10 years ago, we just gathered together, just we always say, just we 抱团儿取暖，也就是just we got warm with each other. Just that's the reason. Everyone have some strengths. They have their they can provide help to others, and also in the meantime, everyone need help from others, especially for the new immigrant. We don't have so many that many friends or relatives or experience here in Canada. We do need help from each other. That's the initial reason we just come together and set up this organization, the Chinese Canadian Agricultural Development Council. So that's the initial reason. Yeah, Shinshan, you have something more to say? Yeah.
For sure, yeah. And I also really want to acknowledge that most of our members from coast to coast, over the 10 years, I'm counting over 180 members along the way. Some of them no longer farm anymore, but then we continuously every year absorb new members. It does by no means represent all the Chinese Canadian experiences. A lot of our folks are members are second career from mainland, learning by doing, just like myself, kind of farmers. And then we would like to see more like broader experience with farmers who are, like the farm that is filmed in Yungchang's documentary, and then other land care stewards and farm workers who are of Chinese origin. I just want to acknowledge that we're by no means, when we say Chinese Canadian farmers, can represent in any way that holistic experience. However, as David was saying, the immigration policy of Canada doesn't really leave much room for people with agricultural professional undertaking to come over here to develop a career. It is very, very few, like close to zero of our, some tried, but most of our members come as skilled workers or other categories of immigration. And this means that, whatever they are doing is a learned experience, a learned profession. So I think it is important to also point out. And then as we continue to face the crisis of farmer shortage. I was reading a report, I think we're expecting 40% of our Canadian farmers retiring by 2033, and shortage of near-term 30,000 skilled farmers in the country. I think this experience of Chinese farmers in a small way is really exploring what can immigrants as a community do in terms of accessing lands, learn the skill, and then make farms work and access support. So that's what CCADC is all about, being together, exploring, advocating for ourselves, and also to seek broader support.
I was wondering if you both could speak to some of the specific work that CCADC is engaging in at the moment, and with your members.
I'm gonna give it a go, and then David can please add. So every year we have field visits, and as most of our members are from Ontario, most of these field visits are arranged during spring and fall months, like before the farms get super busy, visit each other, and every year we can cover up to 10 farms, just understanding who is doing what, and then what kind of success, challenges, lessons learned they have. We have also organized trips to the prairies and to Saskatchewan, for example, to David's farm, I think 2 times already. And these mutual learning trips really help with seeing what other people are doing and even like collaborate. And we host online workshops. For example, people are interested in doing accounting, in doing organic certification, in understanding, how to grow a certain kind of vegetable, and a lot of technicality. So, and then there are a lot of basic things, how to fix your hydro at the farm. Who do you look for? Who are credible service providers who speak your language literally? So those are like examples of some basic like annual events. We do have some overlap now, just with National Farmers Union since I think 2-3 years ago. More people are really looking to also learn from a broader farmer experience through joining farmer associations, and NFU is where I'm at, and then my other fellow Canadian Chinese farmers are starting to also seeing the benefits of doing so. And David, I think I might be missing something here. I'm sure I did.
Yeah, actually, yeah, we are pretty active for our organization. We just visit each other and meet together a couple of times every year. And also in the meantime, we try to find out what other our members they need and what can we help. So let's see at the current moment we are facing a trade war. It will just affect all farmers, and we need to communicate and consult with each other and just to see how do we just fight this kind of challenge. So those things, and also this year is our 10 years anniversary. We are going to just have a lot of a meeting or a gathering or celebration or whatever. In the meantime, we'll just visit each other more often. So that's what I have to say. Yeah.
Well, excellent, and congratulations on your 10-year anniversary. That's really amazing, and certainly, as you mentioned, David, it's a good time to come together as communities and as farmers specifically. There's a lot of uncertainty right now, so I appreciate that comment as well.